Requiem Metal Podcast, episode 48, Tombs and Hooded Menace. Welcome to the Requiem Metal Podcast. You just heard Gossamer from Tombs.
Yeah.
I'm Mark Rudolph.
And I'm Jason Hundy. And we're going to attempt our second try at doing this format of covering two different bands on the same podcast.
Well, this time we've gotten some some people saying
constructive criticism.
Oh, sure. And the first one was an experiment, and they had nothing to do with one another, and that was the point. But these have a little bit more to do with one another. For one, they're both new releases for the most part, and they both kind of have the same vibe, I think, going on.
They're both hybrids in a way.
Yeah.
Of like multiple genres, you know.
And they're also very different.
Yeah, that's true. But
one's uniquely kind of European, and one's uniquely American.
I would say. We're gonna start things off with Tombs, the American band, and then close the second half of the show out with more kind of doom and gloom, if you will, from Hooded Menace is the name of the second band, a record called Fulfill the Curse. So,
and they're big fans of the Templars.
Yeah.
The Knights Templars.
As our cathedral and other people. But, Gossamer, this is, the Tombs band, they had, I believe, a EP?
They had a self-titled before this. Yeah, I couldn't find out exactly who put the thing out. But,
okay.
The guy's been around. Mike Hill has been in the scene for quite a while. He's probably most famously known in Anodyne. He's produced a lot of stuff as well.
I think he was in a band after Anodyne with some of the members from Lit Golden Sky, the Verana or something weird like that.
Yeah, that sounds familiar.
Do you have it written down? I can't remember.
Written down, no.
But the name of the record that we're going to be focused on is Winter Hours, and it's on Relapse, and it just came out late 2008 release, I think, early 2009.
Was it? Oh, it was? Yeah, it was.
Because I think it snuck onto the top 40 of the year, maybe, on Decibel.
I think it actually came out February of this year.
Oh, was it?
Yeah, I think it was promos that we that's how we heard it early. But
so maybe I'm wrong. Maybe I'm imagining something else that snuck onto the top 40.
I was just looking at their MySpace, because they don't really have much of a website presence. I was looking at their MySpace page, and I'm almost positive it said February.
I just picked it up in February, so, at the record store. But really cool cover. I mean, it's like kind of transcended, it's almost like a Virgin Mary type thing with a black kind of halo instead of it being a white halo.
Yeah.
However you want to look at it, it's very opaque and not it's not really clear as to what the imagery is, but kind of modeled on the Converge, I think, art style that Jacob Bandon's been using in the last few records.
Yeah, more so than the Jane Doe-ish, more graphical stuff. This is definitely it strikes me as feeling almost 70s, progressive rock cover.
Yeah,
almost,
it could be that as well, for sure. But
there's certainly as you could tell by Gossamer, it's definitely not that direction at all. And even before looking at doing any research and figuring out what are these guys really influenced by, and
didn't you kind of sit down and you did a brainstorm?
Yeah, I mean, I can't, but okay, it's definitely got some traditional hardcore stuff there with the screaming going on, black metal for sure. I mean, there's a lot of I can't even think, what's the name of the band?
Knockmistium?
Yeah, the Knockmistium, the blasts mixed with kind of more of that almost Black Sabbath-y-ish, heavy guitars, and definitely Neurosis, Godflesh. I always thought My Bloody Valentine, Ride, The Swans, that whole kind of dirty thing. Then Joy Division and Deathspell Omega. Yep. And then looking at their thing, we're into Slint. Basically, it seemed like the kind of band that represented where we're coming from musically, where it's across the board kind of stuff we're into, which is kind of refreshing.
And I was talking, Mark and I were talking earlier today, before we sat down and actually put all this together, and I said, what's really weird about bands like Hooded Menace and Tombs, and Hooded Menace isn't these guys have been in the scene for a while, as have some of the guys in Tombs been in the scene for a while, but I think what you're starting to see is that back in the 90s, kind of the heyday for extreme metal, the late 80s, early 90s and stuff, these were groups that grew up listening to one style of music because it was...
Well, the scenes, there's that truism, true black metal, true Swedish death metal. What? That's kind of something I think is more of a juvenile idea.
Yeah, well, and it's I think as the world sort of globalized and you can connect to and find and have access to whatever music you want to hear via the internet and stuff like that. It's no longer you're caught in a niche scene or whatever your record store has and whatever you and your friends can get your hands on and share between all of you. You can kind of go on and sort of absorb those influences. And I think a lot of the walls have sort of broken down between genres. I guess in the 80s, punk and thrash metal like could kind of get along a little bit because they could respect the speed elements.
At least with Motorhead, yeah.
Yeah, exactly. Well,
Motorhead is like Slayer with their great dividers, yeah. Or the great uniters.
And then hardcore kind of merged with metal at a certain point, like in the late 90s as well, the metalcore thing and stuff. And I mean, it's not like Tombs is rewriting like the book on how to make music or anything, but I think you're starting to see more of these kind of hybrid bands, I guess, come out. And to me, they're more successful. And a few weeks back, we did, the other like new band that we were featuring was Obscura. And Obscura was like a technical death metal band, but they were like merging like 10 different ways of like approaching that style. You know, with acoustics. With
it's almost like American a lot of the mistakes have been made, and it's like, okay, well, let's just take the best parts of all these genres, put them together, and then we get the good stuff.
And so you're starting to see like I guess maybe younger people or even just like bands that have been around for a while exploring these avenues and comfortably being able to say, you know what, hey, I like My Bloody Valentine and I like black metal, and like there's nothing wrong with that, and I can put those two together in sort of a unique way. And and I'm also into Keelhaul, and so I want my drummer to sound like Will from Keelhaul, which is another thing that is definitely an influence on this Tombs record, is that
it's got like a High on Fire meets Keelhaul kind of feel as far as the drums go, I think.
With a little dash of Mastodon that I heard in there. Not as technical, but just sort of
the drummers Andrew Hernandez and the bass players Carson James, and I think both of them are relative newcomers. But
and Anodyne is unique too. What's his name? Mike Hill?
He's the guitarist.
And is he the
vocalist? Yeah.
Anodyne also, this is a band like Mark and I don't really have like a lot of knowledge on.
Like a lot of bands we really enjoy either have members from Anodyne or like people like Keelhaul's like, oh, these guys are fantastic.
Yeah, 27 is a band that you and I are really into, and they the guitar player,
his name escapes me, but
it's like Neil or something like that.
Neil's the drummer.
It's not Neil.
It's some goofy
odd
name.
Iyer or something weird like that. We interviewed the guy, it's Ayal, Ayal or something like that. If he's listening to this, he's gonna be like, he's got two middle fingers held up, like, you assholes, But anyways, he came from the band as well, so it was obviously a breeding ground for a lot of like kind of creative outside, the box kind of.
Well, I think that's that early kind of post-hardcore, hardcore, metalcore scenes, like before it became what we think of as metalcore now. I think it was some really creative stuff, but I think it just kind of became a hot topic, kind of marketing ploy after a while.
Yeah,
but even with like what ISIS is doing on their newest record, ISIS is they've never really wandered too far away from what they've been comfortable with outside of really, really minor things, at least by my ears. And this is what ISIS could have done to build that wall of sound more instead of just the kind of plotting direction they went. But this was kind of like, it was nice to hear the new ISIS, then hear this. It's like, okay, that's kind of refreshing.
This is what I kind of want out of ISIS,
And this is definitely the kind of record that I specifically bought on vinyl as well, because this is something I want to really, the production, and they're only a 3-piece too. The production on the thing is just like unbelievable. Well, it's so dense.
They adopt the true aesthetic of what shoegazer is all about, which is essentially a wall of sound, and they're going to craft that to you. And it's not a wall of sound in the way that, like, when we did our Converge show, that Jane Doe was like a wall of sound that, like, ate you alive. I mean, it really, like, cut through you in a way. This is sort of like
immersive.
It's immersive, but there's a certain amount of warmth, I guess, that exists in this sort of, like, wall of sound that it's still like for instance, when I popped this in the other day, I was playing it in the car with my girlfriend, who's not really a big fan of metal at all, but it didn't grate her, in any way where she like complained. It was sort of like it had that analog warmth to it, the same way that like My Bloody Valentine is very harsh and loud, but
has like really like sweet vocals.
Yeah, it has like beautiful like sweet vocals, but like people who are into like like indie pop love My Bloody Valentine. Same with like Ride or Slint or some of these bands. Like there's a darkness to them and a hugeness to like some of the things they're doing in a very.
They like transcend the genre they're in. I think really.
And I think Tombs is a band that could easily like cross over into the hipster market, if you will, but and not that I'm trying to like, make fun of that scene, but they definitely have cross genre appeal outside of just like metalheads,
It's funny though, I don't know how many people actually remember this band, but it was like, I think, what was it, in the early 2000s, My Vitriol?
Yeah, you and I were like the biggest fans, and like nobody got behind them.
Nobody cared. I haven't gone to listen to the thing. I don't know how well it holds up, but they had some really like nice crushing guitar, really great like crushing guitar tone, and it was kind of like a nice like shoegaze part 2 kind of thing, and just the kind of clingy guitar noise really kind of reminded me of that, and like Interpol and Franz Ferdinand kind of stuff as well. But they're probably coming from the same source material.
But I mean, like I think there's you and I kind of got into shoegazer late, I guess, like because obviously for you in the early 90s, you were not paying attention to the indie scene really at all. You were kind of in the Swedish death metal and all that sort of stuff when like Loveless and stuff like that was coming out from My Boy Valentine and the Slow Dive records and things. And so you and I kind of almost like got into it right at the same time, like late 90s, early 2000s, when I was doing the Saucer Full of Secrets record show, or radio show, on CMU Public Radio. And like, we were trying to look for like new undiscovered things for us, and then kind of throwing them back out to the audience, and like it all made sense and sort of fit, because I think at the time, like, we were buying like Last Fair Deal Gone Down from Catatonia and going, this is littered with like shoegaze, so shoegaze has always had a presence there, like Neurosis. I think obviously probably listened to a certain amount of that stuff, especially like on the last song on Sun That
Never Sets.
Yeah, where the whole song kind of falls apart and deconstructs. I mean, that's very much a My Boy Valentine kind of idea of like, let's see what we can do, and we can tear apart a song, And I think even like Converge and other bands like down the road have sort of used that idea, Dillinger Escape Plan, like this sort of almost like tearing apart songs. And certainly you mentioned the Justin Broderick, Godflesh influence.
Oh, for sure.
And what he's doing with Jesus today and stuff like that is a continuation of the Godflesh sound. But I think I can see Tombs going on tour with Jesus and like totally appealing to that same.
Yeah, I find Tombs more interesting, to tell you the truth. It's more engaging. Jesus can be or Jesus, however the hell you say it, I think can be a little bit annoying. It's almost.
Well, some of the stuff,
it's
like,
a little too sparse.
You almost disconnect from it. It's like, to me, it's like close your eyes headphone kind of records. Whereas like Godflesh was more confrontational. I think what he's doing now is like more like he's purposely being like outer spacey or something, which can be very boring and very.
Well, the thing is, I throw on the records when I'm drawing at the art desk or something, and then when it's over, I don't remember anything about it. It's just kind of like soundscapey kind of stuff, which I think is the point of some of that sort of, I guess, transcendent stuff. Like when I teach like my kids about like Buddhism and stuff, and they're trying to like figure out like what the hell is meditation, like, because I tell them meditation is not what you think it is. It's not like just sitting down and you don't say a mantra. I said it's very tough, and it's very like you sort of like step outside yourself. And I tell them it's often comparable to like when you drive on the highway. And like all of a sudden you're like 60 miles down the road and you're like, what? Am I awake? What have I been doing? I said that's what like meditation, like getting out of that is. And I think you saying like you can't remember what the heck a Hezu or whatever record sounds like at the end. I think it's that same experience. I think Justin Broderick can probably smile and go, "You got it. That's exactly what I'm gonna go roll
for.
a joint. I'll see you later."
Yeah, exactly. So, but Tombs is definitely more because of the black metal, because of some of these other elements, the Keelhaul drumming, which is very interesting and very like alive.
I mean, it's almost got like a tribal, kind of like African beat to it, if you want to, say that, with the just how it kind of plods through the wall of sound. That's what drives the whole thing. Yeah,
it drives it, and it keeps it rooted in songwriting and not like lost in like spacey shoegaze, like where like it's not an anchor to anything. The drumming and the harsh vocals that come in at times, because Mike Hill can go from like clean to sort of like a harsh black
almost like
style,
or even like an Anglo hardcore kind of thing too, which is kind of cool. At first I was kind of on the fence about it, but I think it works perfectly with it.
So this is definitely a record like where tell us what you think afterwards, like what was your thoughts on it, because you might be hearing things that we're not hearing, and obviously this is also, we should say, a good record that for somebody to sit down and listen from start to finish, and just us playing 4 songs off of it, like we're kind of cutting up what is meant to be like one piece of music.
Yeah,
really.
I think as cliche as it sounds, and I say this all the time about, I always listen to the album, but certain albums are definitely made for the full experience, and some are definitely, you could pull out as. And the title track Gossamer has actually got a video, which I think Gossamer on its own stands alone pretty well, but taking some of the intermediate songs out, they might not be as strong as or it might seem a little redundant because the riffs even kind of carry on from song to song sometime.
And we've got a trio that we're going to throw at you here in the next set. And the first tune, The Great Silence, opens up and with something that's it just was instantaneously catchy. And I said, oh man, this sounds like a song from the very first Franz Ferdinand record.
The real clingy kind of guitar,
And you said, well, it sounds like Interpol, and then we both kind of
it sounds like Joy Division.
It's got to go back to Joy Division, some of the sort of like depressing new wave kind of stuff that happened in the early 80s. So I don't know, if you hear something else, let us know, because that's where we're kind of being able to pop up. And then Filled with Secrets, and then 7 Stars, The Angel of Death, which is a pretty killer title. What are some of the other, I guess, influences they're going to hear in here that maybe we haven't mentioned? I mean, we gave them like 4,000, but do we have 4,001 or?
I think I blew my load there, man.
All right. Well, we'll come back and maybe talk a little bit more about like 7 Stars and the Angel of Death and stuff like that. But I think Great Silence is a great kind of melodic place to sort of start.
Yeah.
And kind of builds towards, look for those black metal elements. I think you'll hear them a little bit in.
You hear it in The Great Silence. I believe there's like almost like a blast.
Okay, yeah, there's a blast in that. I'm trying to remember and looking at the notes and stuff. 7 Stars has it's a little more in your face as well. I think the song that will close out, but we'll come back and talk about all that when we come back. So enjoy The Great Silence. 7 stars, The Angel of Death, Filled with Secrets, and The Great Silence from the band Tombs. They're from New York?
New York City.
Yeah, New York City. And that was, all 4 cuts can be found on Winter Hours, which you can find a link to this record on
our the side. We'll have a little sidebar with the playlists, and
and this will probably be on at least one of ours, if not both of ours, our playlists here pretty soon. So
one thing, when I first listened to this, like visually, it made me think of driving into like a whiteout conditions in a car and being like trying to stay on track kind of thing. There's certain like that, and the second Immortal record, or third Immortal record,
Battles in the North
always give me that feel, because I've actually had, well, at least with Immortal, I used to commute about an hour for this job. I worked on the weekends doing some layout at a real estate company, and there's complete whiteout conditions listening to that record, and it was almost like
perfect. Kind of
like you felt the record more than you ever should have. Almost. It's like you became one with the thing as you're going.
That's a cool aesthetic. I mean, for me, I've only really been listening to this Tombs record for the last few weeks, you know, and so not like super intensely. Like I knew I liked it, I put it on, but it's, you can kind of lose yourself in it because the whole album sort of bleeds together.
Yeah, I've listened to it like 4 times in a row before. So it's.
And the last song is a good way to sort of like kind of bookend these guys, because it starts with like I don't know, I guess you could mention Neurosis, but that type of drone, but like still like a little harsher, a little more
and I think
heart to it than,
if you want to it all compare them to Neurosis, it's more of like what they did on put the album with Locust Star on it.
That's funny that I just forgot that.
We just talked about like 5 minutes
ago. Through
Silver and Blood. How that album was constantly, it was like bringing you to that breakdown, but never gave you all of it. Mm-hmm. And this has that same kind of aesthetic, but outside of that, I don't really see a whole lot of Neurosis in them. Yeah, because the Neurosis name gets thrown around way too much for anything experimental, post-hardcore kind of stuff.
I mean, everybody wants to tag on to it because it's like the happening thing with like kind of hipsterism or whatever. So
yeah, it's like, it's Neurosis, okay.
Yeah, throw that into a review and you're gonna get like 4,000 albums sold, more than what you would have. So, but it's a really cool band, and definitely something that if you like these 4 songs, you'll like the whole record. I mean, it's a kind of a good overview of sort of all that stuff. The tomb sound, if you will. So, and I could see some pretty promising kind of places that this band's going to go to. And one of the things that's kind of interesting about Tombs, and the next band we're going to jump into, Hooded Menace, and then the other new band that we covered a few weeks back, Obscura, is that all 3 of these bands, for whatever reason, got 9s on, got 9s on, the decibel stuff. Yeah. So, but we're not going to talk much about Hooded Menace yet. We're going to play a couple samples for you, and then we're going to come back and kind of get into the fury of the sound. So, here's Hooded Menace with Fulfill the Curse, and then the love song of Gotho, Hunchback of the Morgue.
So free.
That was the love song of Gatho, Hunchback of the Morgue, and then we had Fulfill the Curse from Hooded Menace. And
yeah, I just cut Jason off a little early on that last talk set because we were expecting a pizza delivery and the buzzer would go off. So
yeah, pizza. What was the pizza place?
Pizza House Pizzeria.
Yeah,
best pizza in Ann Arbor, Michigan.
There you go. So we have human needs as well, and our capacity and need to eat and have nutrition came up. So, but. That's fine because we didn't want to talk too much about Hooded Menace in that set, anyways. But what you heard there obviously was some pretty crushing doom. I mean, Fulfill the Curse, that has so many like cathedral force of equilibrium kind of isms, if you will, going on all over the place. I mean, lyrically, the band is inspired like Cathedral was on a few of their songs.
The Tombs of the Blind Dead Templar movies.
the Knights of the Templar horror films, the Spanish things from like the early 70s.
Really good special effects on those, not to tributary off here too much, but the story is boring as hell. But the effects are great.
Yeah, and I've heard the first two are pretty awesome, and then they get really kind of crappy.
I've got them on one DVD, yeah.
Yeah, so I like check them out. I think I've seen clips of them and stuff like that, but I've never seen the whole thing.
It's a lot of people stumbling and then reaction shots and then being scared, and it's not shot very well. But as far as the effects and the aesthetic of it, looks pretty nice.
Yeah, and I could see where
cool idea
where that stuff could be kind of a cool like horror music kind of concept, to it. But they're from Finland, which is odd, and maybe you can hear that innate Finnish sound that's
certain something that it seems like every Finnish record, outside of Children of Bodom. But I mean, anybody that goes
Children of Bodom's like early stuff, you can like sense it in a few places.
Yeah, they've always had this weird almost affinity for like that really thick, warm analog Sabbath sound, and it's almost unmistakably Finnish. I don't know what it is. Maybe it's the the kind of voltage they use in the recording or something. I don't know, but it's that's something you see a lot with like bands like Convulse. I think
Zisma,
a couple of,
even.
Oh yeah, Zisma, and I mean even with like some of the Morphous tones, like on the first couple of records, is almost that unmistakable Finnish sound.
Yeah,
and hearing this like really kind of cranked up loud on speakers, it's incredibly thick. I mean, It almost like if you see these guys live, you're gonna like have your heart palpitate or something from it.
Yeah,
shake the floor.
It's got the same sort of feel as Electric Wizard's some of their stuff. Dope
Throne, yeah.
and where it's just dirty and just disgusting as hell, but it's still doom metal. As well as another band which, I don't know whatever happened to these guys, but Charger was a band on Peaceville, and they were like just a weird hybrid band too, with like Dark Throne meets Electric Wizard meets My Dying Bride,
a bunch of I Hate God
vocals on stuff like that. So if you like your doom kind of gross and ugly, this is definitely a band for you. But yet there's like these weird like melodies that will sort of pop in and out at times, and some of it's from Cathedral, which you point out. Some's Paradise Lost.
There's a couple Cathedral riffs that are one note off or played slow. I mean, that was my kind of one of my first impressions of it. It was like, this almost sounds like if I listened to like Violet Vortex or the Ethereal Mirror on a slow speed.
Yeah.
Where it's that plotting stuff like Force of Equilibrium, but it still has those breakthrough leads that kind of pierce through this. And there's a lot of clarity to the whole record.
Yeah. It's not as bleak as Forest, where it's like almost like one pace, like the whole record.
It's like a funeral march, the whole thing.
Yeah.
But this is a little less bleak than that, I would agree.
Because I guess from what I remember reading, I think it may have been in Decibel, though, where they talked about the band was originally they were 3-piece, and they were originally formed out of Phlegathon, which is a Finnish, like kind of like weird Finnish band from the early 90s.
They put a couple, they put like 2 or 3 demos out. They never put a full-length record out.
Yeah, so and these guys are, I guess, intimate. They're linked in some other bands as well. Like they got a lot of side projects going on, but they kind of disappeared off the planet and kind of came back. And they're on Razorback Records, which is not a record label I'm terribly familiar with.
I couldn't tell you anything else.
But there seem to be some people like on Doom sites, when I was poking around trying to find anything about Hooded Menace, that seem to say that this fit with the aesthetic of Razorback Records. They're known for like their horror movie inspired lyrics or thematic elements or something.
Well, maybe that Knights Templar thing just put them over the top. So all right, you guys got a deal. But I can't believe that nobody else would throw a deal out.
I can't. Yeah.
But looking at the cover looks it's awesome.
It's so. It reminds me of like In Battle There Is No Law from Bolt Thrower.
Well, it's not even to that degree of artistic ability. It looks like the old like Nihilist demos or something like this. Really, there's something you scribble on the back of a piece of typing paper and folded it in there.
Yeah.
But it's this great. The imagery is great. The logo is fantastic. It's like how's that not been done yet?
Yeah. But I mean, it's so over the top.
Huge upside down cross, dripping junk all over the place, and
which is weird because when you read like stuff about the band claimed to be a death metal band, but like they're like 25% death metal, 75% doom. So
or even less.
Maybe it's that like Finnish insanity, like where these guys just really
not taking enough fish oil for all the what are they in 6 months of complete darkness.
Yeah, exactly. They're a little off with it, but. I guess how these guys got started is they started jamming a whole bunch of Candlemass riffs, and they wanted to play them like more disgusting.
Candlemass meets Autopsy. Autopsy
like
aesthetic.
And they took he said, take Tales of Creation, Candlemass, and then like play a whole bunch of Cathedral, Asphyx, and Hellhammer, Winter kind of stuff in there, and so. What you get is this crazy sort of hybrid. I mean, some of his vocals have Lee Dorian effects to them. I think you'll hear it in some
of the vibrato he has a little bit.
Yeah,
but it's incredibly guttural, which is another kind of Finnish, attribute. Like go back to like Demolich, and where the guy like his whole shtick was he could control burp, and that was the vocals.
Yeah, God, Demolich. I've never considered myself much of a Demolich fan.
It's not bad.
Yeah, well, that's what people say.
Yeah.
But then like they're not afraid to go up tempo a little bit, which you just heard with the Love Song of Gotho, which has a real Children of the Grave, like Black Sabbath kind of feel to it, where it's like actually hits a groove for a little bit.
Yeah, like galloping speed.
Yeah. So. They're across the board, and they're really a pretty cool band, and you definitely hear that Scandinavian touch to them. Even though they're rooted in like Cathedral style, you could tell they have that Candlemass sort of sensibility of like note selection and having just a little bit more like classical like ability. Whereas like Cathedral's like coming out of the Sabbath of like. We're not gonna throw any like tasteful leads or anything. It's just gonna be like one kind of one pace, and it's all going to be blues based. There's more like that classical nature going on. And then you said you hear like the Asphyx in some of like the breakdowns sometimes, right?
The breakdowns in the production.
Yeah.
I don't think any band, even this band, doesn't sound as thick to me as the first two Asphyx records. You turn it on, it's almost like television static, but then it keeps coming in and out, and how thick the production is amazing. I love that sound.
Yeah. And then a band like I've recently like discovered, I mean, I've heard about this band for years, as you have, but only recently have I been able to kind of track it down, as The Winner.
I still haven't heard it.
And
I probably might have heard it back in the day, but I probably dismissed it as something because I was a stupid 15-year-old kid.
Yeah.
Who knows?
It's pretty cool, and it's very like kind of disgusting, dirty, doomed kind of stuff, cool. and you can kind of hear that influence here. So,
American band?
Boy, you got me on that one.
Okay.
And people are there probably diehard Winter fans out there. They're like, holding up their crosses.
We're trying.
Yeah. We'll look into that though. We'll let you know in a moment. But anyways, let's get back into some tunage, and these two tunes here, especially this opening cut. This is probably my favorite song so far on the record. Again, the name of the record is "Fulfill the Curse," and it's one thing that's cool too is if you get to hear the whole record, and they use a lot of cool like horror movie samples and different things like that are mixed into some of the songs, so it gives it kind of that
pretty
same feel
deep in the mix too.
yeah. It's sort of that same feel that you got like with some of the stuff on Dope Throne, again from Electric Wizard, where like there's different sort of things weaving in and out. But the Eyeless Horde has a real Serpent's Eve vibe from Forest. But then, even the vocals have like a very Lee Dorian feel. I think this is the most Lee Dorian vocal inspired on the whole record, this song in particular. But there's this dual lead that comes in that's just like awesome. It's very catchy. I don't know where it's coming out of. You mentioned you think it's Thiromir type stuff.
That's what it reminded me of right off the bat. But
it has like that epic feel, like Violet Vortex. Just real kind of as galloping as you're gonna get.
It's like a flurry of notes,
kind of the thing that like Candlemass would have done, like, and still been slow as hell, but still like had like these kind of like, I don't know, we'll let you decide what you think. So we're gonna do this and Beauty and the Feast.
Nice pun. There we go.
So enjoy Eyeless Horde and Beauty and the Feast from Hooded Menace. that was Beauty and the Feast and the Eyeless Horde. And Beauty and the Feast, just what a great breakdown about halfway through that song. And it's infectious, but yet in the same way that some of the Cathedral and Electric Wizard stuff, and even the Charger stuff that I mentioned earlier.
Yeah. Well, and really, there's not a whole lot of bands that really do a whole lot of Cathedral lifting, and I think they're definitely due for that. And
I think that was what was so striking to me when I first picked up this record, was that I was like, whoa, people like mention Force of Equilibrium, but no one's like really tried to take that and do anything like different with it and play around with the Force of Equilibrium sound.
Formula, yeah.
People obviously have ripped off like mid-era Cathedral sound quite a bit.
But nobody's really attempted outside of like Godsend, a couple other, very obscure bands that have ever really tried to do much of the Lee Dorian vocal delivery either, which is kind of...
It's kind of neat. It's kind of refreshing because Cathedral's a big band for you and I, and a band that
the funny
like
thing
get
is
a lot of attention.
They're kind of polarizing for the fact that just people don't. You've got to. His Lee Dorian's vocals are an acquired taste for sure.
And I think you gotta almost see him live. Like I remember seeing Cathedral live and like him
as a frontman
wrapping
he's insane.
The microphone around his head, and
we saw him on the Ethereal Mirror tour. Me and Chris had done. Then I think they opened for. They opened for like Halford or Fight or something like that, something goofy.
Probably Fight at that time.
But he was just dancing around the stage like a lunatic the whole time. He's a fantastic frontman, really charismatic guy,
very energetic and stuff. And I think you kind of get Cathedral when you see him live. I think sometimes. So, but the record closes off with a really kind of a cool tune, and so we're gonna close our set out with it as well, and. It's a cover song, actually, but it's one that I doubt many people would recognize. And we tried to find the original, and we actually have a collection of some of this guy's songs. Fabio Frizzi, and he's an Italian composer, a horror movie composer. He did a lot of the Fulci movies, like The Beyond and The Gates of Hell and Zombie and some of that stuff. And
all great movies.
All fantastic movies.
Shark fights a zombie.
Yes. And Beyond, if you want to see
the greatest opening title sequence ever.
Pretty brutal stuff with the railroad spikes. And
guy gets crucified on the wall, and acid in the face, and
there's spiders tearing tongue out and eyeballs out, and popping those out.
And the great, not to go on a Fulci rant, but the great thing about Fulci is he keeps the camera right there and watches it all.
Yeah. There's that great scene where
in the morgue,
the little girl watches the acid like
tip over and melt her mom's
head and stuff.
Great editing on those movies.
Yeah, it's good fun for the whole family, really. Yeah. And this comes from I can't remember the movie, the American like translation, but it was something to do with New York, and it was part of the Gates of Hell trilogy. If I'm not mistaken. So there was The Beyond, there was
House by the Cemetery?
Yeah, House by the Cemetery, and then there was, what was the other one that had something to do with New York, I think, or was House by the Cemetery the New York one? Was House by the Cemetery the one where the guy gets his head in a drill bit?
Yeah.
Okay, then it was a different one, I think.
Which is on the cover of the CD.
Yeah, I can't for the life of me remember. But the tune is called "Theme from Manhattan," and it's a kind of a neat way. It's very like transcendent, and
it's kind of an upbeat ending too.
Yeah,
it's funny.
It is kind of a weird kind of ending, and
because Frizzy's stuff was very. It juxtaposed so different with the visuals on the screen, like this horrible, horrific stuff, and this kind of upbeat synth
these
stuff.
like bubbly, like synth kind of thing.
Yeah.
Very similar, like kind of what Goblin did for a lot of the Argento movies, but
almost a little more subdued, I think.
Yeah,
Goblin's a little over the top.
Yeah, exactly. And obviously, there's that Relapse band Zombie that I think is obviously very inspired by both Frizzi and Goblin. So, but it's cool. Like, there's almost like a epic nature to it in the way that you hear like what Rapture did on a couple of their first couple records, where it's like the beautiful, but really like dark. Yeah, like that sort of Paradise Lost did it like on Christendom and some of that that sort of feel to it. So it's a good way to kind of close the show out and put a bookend to Hooded Menace. So we hope you kind of dug this style. I think you can see that these two bands kind of fused together, I guess, a little bit better than A Blaze My Sorrow and Obscura did.
Sure,
and they're two newer bands, so we're trying to kind of give a spotlight to a couple bands that you may not have heard of. I mean, Hooded Menace being on Razorback Records. I mean, this one could totally
sure, you can get on Amazon though.
Steer past you. Yeah. So we'll put a link up for that because that's definitely on both of our playlists. So. But do send us an email, requiempodcast@gmail.com, or put a link on your site.
On your blog site, or definitely give us iTunes or TalkShoe. Reviews would be fantastic. And definitely check out the website, requiempodcast.com, where you can find all kinds of goodies, not just the podcast, but all kinds of extras as well.
Sure.
More to come.
We're going to try and make it more...
it's a destination spot on the internet for metal.
That is true. Tell your friends, tell your neighbors, tell your loved ones all about it. But enjoy the instrumental triumphant theme from Manhattan from Hooded Menace as we take this one home. So for the Requiem Metal Podcast, I'm Jason.
And I'm Mark.